It was a kind of summer that seemed to stretch endlessly, thick with heat and silence. My parents were away on a cruise, something they planned for years, and for the first time, I had the house mostly to myself. I say mostly because my older brother Jordan had come back from college, dragging along his best friend, Colton. They were both seniors, already half-packed with stories of adult life, late-night parties, and road trips I hadn't been part of. I was 19, barely out of my first year of college, and suddenly I felt like a kid again in their presence, especially his. Colton was the kind of person who walked into a room and changed the air, not in a loud or dramatic way. He wasn't that type, but with a certain quiet magnetism. He had this effortless confidence that didn't need to prove itself. Wavy brown hair that always looked slightly messy, a faded tattoo on his forearm he never explained, and a voice that lingered even after he stopped talking. People listened when he spoke, even when he wasn't trying to lead. He wasn't trying with me, either, and maybe that's what made it worse. Jordan had always been the golden boy, outgoing, athletic, the kind of brother people liked before they even met him. I was the opposite, quiet, observant, always hiding behind sketchbooks and headphones. In a family where noise was currency, I'd made a home in the quiet corners. Jordan didn't mind. We'd grown up parallel, not close. His world didn't often intersect with mine, until Colton came into the picture. They spent most of their days out, hiking, driving to the lake, meeting up with old friends. I stayed behind, telling myself I liked the silence. I'd sketch on the porch, read in the attic, or lie on my bed staring at the ceiling fan, wondering why everything felt so heavy when it was supposed to be a carefree summer. Sometimes I'd hear them coming late at night, laughing in hushed voices, smelling like beer and summer air. Colton's laugh stayed with me longer than I'd like to admit. There were moments, small ones, easily dismissible, where Colt would glance at me longer than necessary. A shared look in the kitchen when everyone else was talking. A brush of his hand when passing by in the hallway. Once, when they were watching a movie and I passed through the living room, he paused the film and asked me if I wanted to join. Jordan rolled his eyes like it was nothing, but it stayed with me. I said no. I always said no. It wasn't that I didn't want to. It was that I didn't know how to exist around Colton without feeling like my skin didn't fit right. He made me nervous in a way I couldn't rationalize. It wasn't just that he was attractive. It was that he noticed me, really noticed me, in a way most people didn't. I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination. One night, I stayed up drawing in my room. The windows were cracked open, letting in the scent of night grass and distant rain. I was working on a portrait, just a practice sketch, but the face forming on the paper was unmistakably his. I stared at it, my pencil paused midline. I told myself it was nothing, just a study in proportions, in shadows and angles. I told myself it as I ripped the page out and shoved it in the back of my drawer, heart pounding. I knew I was treading into dangerous territory, feelings I had no business entertaining, especially about someone like Colton, someone who belonged to Jordan's world, not mine, someone who couldn't possibly see me the way I was beginning to see him. Or maybe he did, and that was the scariest part of all. A part of me wanted to lock the door on those thoughts, to shut them down and forget. But another part, a quieter, more honest part, hoped he'd knock on that door instead. And one night, he did. It was 2:04 a.m. when I heard the knock, soft, uncertain, like whoever was on the other side wasn't sure they should be there. I had been awake for hours, staring at the ceiling as my thoughts twisted and unraveled into things I didn't want to admit. The house was wrapped in silence. Only the hum of the fan overhead and the faint chirp of crickets seeped through the open window. The knock came again, a little firmer this time. I sat up, heart already racing. Maybe it was Jordan. Maybe something happened. But when I opened the door, it wasn't my brother standing there. Colton. He stood barefoot in the hallway, a worn gray T-shirt clinging to his frame and sleep still heavy in his eyes. "Sorry," he whispered, voice low and rough. I couldn't sleep. My mouth went dry. Okay." He scratched the back of his neck, looking sheepish the first time since I'd met him. Jordan snoring like a chainsaw. And the couch is awful. I didn't want to crash in the living room alone. Figured maybe I could hang out here for a bit. I stepped aside before I could overthink it. He slipped in, quiet as a secret. He didn't sit at first, just stood there, glancing around my room like he'd never really looked at it before. My sketchbooks were stacked on the desk, a few pencils scattered across the floor. The room wasn't much, just a bed, a dresser, a lamp, but it was mine. It felt different with a minute. Colton ran a hand through his hair, then dropped onto the edge of my bed like it was the most normal thing in the world. "You always keep it this clean?" he asked, almost teasing. I shrugged, still standing. "Mostly. Helps me think." He nodded. "You think a lot, huh?" "More than you know." I didn't say that, though. I just sat down on the opposite end of the bed, careful not to get too close. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was charged, like we were both waiting for something neither of us wanted to name. He leaned back on his palms, eyes flicking toward me. "You're different from Jordan." I let out a breath. "Yeah, we've always been opposite." Colton smiled faintly. "He talks about you a lot, you know." That caught me off guard. "Really?" "Yeah. Always said you were the smart one, the deep one." I looked at him, really looked at him, and for a moment, it felt like the air had shifted. His face was soft in the dim light, less guarded, more real. And then he said, quieter this time, "I like that about you." I didn't know what to say. My throat felt too tight to speak, so I just nodded and looked away. He moved first, slowly, deliberately, shifting so that he was lying back on the bed, hand behind his head. "Is it cool if I crash here for a bit, just until I can fall asleep?" I hesitated. "Yeah, sure." I lay down next to him. Stiff at first, every nerve in my body lit up. There was at least a foot of space between us, but I could feel the heat of him, the rhythm of his breathing. It should have been nothing. Just two guys lying side by side, waiting for sleep. But it wasn't. Minutes passed. Neither of us moved. Then, without a word, his hand brushed mine, barely a touch, like an accident. But it lingered. And then it was an accident. My fingers curled around his. The room stayed silent. He didn't speak. Neither did I. The fan spun lazily above us. Somewhere outside, a dog barked once and fell quiet again. But inside that moment, everything else disappeared. It wasn't a kiss. It wasn't a confession. But it was something real. Something I wasn't ready for. But couldn't let go of either. I stared at the ceiling, our hands still gently pressed together, wondering what tomorrow would look like, if it would be different, if he would pretend it hadn't happened. But in that moment, I didn't care. All I knew was that something had shifted, and there was no going back. The morning after, Colton was gone. I woke to an empty bed, the sheets on his side still slightly creased, as if he left only moments before. The air felt heavy, thick with unspoken questions. I lay there for a long time, trying to piece together what had happened, and whether it had meant anything beyond that one fragile moment of silence and skin. Downstairs, I could hear voices, Jordan laughing, Colton responding like nothing had changed. I didn't go down right away. I couldn't. My chest was a mess of emotions I didn't know how to categorize. Was it hope? Guilt? Anticipation? I felt all of it at once. When I finally walked into the kitchen, Colton looked up. Our eyes met, just for a second, just long enough for me to search for something in his expression. Recognition, maybe, a flicker of what we'd shared. But he only gave me a polite nod, then turned back to his cereal like it was any other morning. Jordan tossed me a granola bar. "You sleeping or what?" "Yeah," I lied, unwrapping it with shaking hands. Didn't feel like getting up. Colton didn't say a word. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I spent most of it in my room pretending to be busy, flipping through sketchbooks, listening to music I couldn't focus on. I kept replaying the night in my head, frame by frame, wondering if I'd imagined it all. But I hadn't. I knew what I felt, and I knew he'd felt something too. That night, I didn't expect him to come back. I told myself I didn't care. He didn't. For the next 3 days, Colton avoided being alone with me. It wasn't obvious, but I noticed. If I walked into the living room, he got up to grab something from the kitchen. If I sat on the porch, he stayed inside. And when we did have to talk, it was short, casual, like we were acquaintances, strangers even. The distance gnawed at me. I couldn't understand it. Was he afraid, regretful, or worse, ashamed? Then, on the fourth night, Jordan left to meet some friends at a bar in town, leaving just the two of us at the house. I was in the backyard, sitting on the edge of the porch steps, watching the sky dim into violet. I didn't hear Colton approach, but I felt him when he sat beside me. Not too close, but close enough. "Nice night," he said, voice low. "Yeah." Silence stretched between us. I didn't know how to start. Maybe I wasn't supposed to. But then he spoke again. "That night in your room, I didn't mean to mess with your head." I turned to look at him, trying to read the expression he kept carefully neutral. "You didn't mess with my head." "I think I did," he said quietly. "I shouldn't have come in. Shouldn't have stayed." "Why did you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He hesitated. Then, with a kind of exhausted honesty, he said, "Because I felt safe with you. I didn't know I needed that until I did. But it doesn't mean I know what to do with it now." I nodded, swallowing hard. "So what happens now?" Colton didn't answer. Instead, he looked away toward the darkening yard. "Jordan, he's like a brother to me. And you are his actual brother. If he knew..." "You think I don't know that?" I snapped before I could stop myself. "You think I haven't thought about how screwed up this is?" He looked back at me, startled by the sudden edge in my voice. I stood up, the air between us tense and electric. "I'm not asking you to make promises," I said. "I'm not even asking you to feel the same way. But don't pretend like nothing happened. Don't make me feel like I'm crazy." "I'm not," he said, rising slowly. "I think about it every time I see you." I froze. "But I'm scared," he continued, almost himself. "I've never felt like this before. Not about a guy. Not about anyone, really." I wanted to reach out, to say something that would make it easier for both of us. But instead, I just nodded. "I get it." The next day, things were different. Not fixed, not resolved, but different. Colton didn't avoid me anymore. He lingered in the doorway when I was drawing. He made coffee for both of us in the mornings. We didn't talk about that night again, but we didn't pretend it never happened either. There was an unspoken understanding between us, a quiet tether neither of us dared pull too tightly. And then came the afternoon that shattered it. I had left one of my sketchbooks on the coffee table. It was stupid. I'd been working on a new piece, a portrait of Colton, drawn from memory. Every line carved with too much feeling. I'd forgotten to put away. Jordan found it. I walked into the living room and saw him standing there, flipping through the pages. His face was unreadable, but his eyes were sharp, like he'd just stumbled across something that shifted everything. He looked up. "You've been drawing him?" My stomach dropped. "It's not what you think." Jordan closed the sketchbook and set it down. "Then what is it?" I couldn't speak. My mouth opened, then closed again. He stepped closer. "Did something happen between you two?" The silence said enough. Jordan exhaled, slow and hard. "He's not for you. You hear me?" "I didn't choose this," I said, voice cracking. "Well, neither did I. But he's my best friend. And you're my brother. And this, whatever this is, can't happen." He walked past me, heading for the stairs, leaving the room colder than it had ever been. I stood there, heart aching, eyes fixed on the sketchbook still lying on the table. It wasn't just about feelings anymore. It was about consequences. And for the first time, I realized that no matter what Colton and I felt, the world around us was never going to make it easy. And the worst part, I still didn't want to let go. Colton didn't come back to the house that night. Jordan said he went to stay with an old friend across town for a few days. And the way he said it made it clear I wasn't supposed to ask questions. So I didn't. But I felt every inch of his absence like a bruise I couldn't stop pressing. The house was quiet again, but not in the peaceful way it had been at the beginning of summer. Now the silence felt sharp, cold. Jordan barely spoke to me. We moved around each other like strangers sharing space. I missed a version of him that used to at least pretend to care. But I missed Colton more. Days passed. I checked my phone too many times. No texts, No calls. No sign that he even remembered what we'd shared. Maybe he was trying to forget. Maybe Jordan had convinced him to. When the weekend came, Jordan threw a small birthday party in the backyard. A few people I didn't know showed up. Some old friend from school, a couple girls he used to flirt with. I stayed inside, watching from the kitchen window, nursing a bottle of water, like it was something stronger. And then Colton showed up. He looked the same but different, like he'd slept too little and thought too much. Our eyes met through the glass for a moment before he looked away. He laughed at someone's joke. He hugged Jordan. And then he pulled a girl into a dance near the fire pit. I watched her lean into him, her hand on his chest, his lips near her ear. And then it happened. He kissed her. It wasn't passionate. It wasn't even long. But it was intentional. Something in me cracked. I went upstairs and closed my door behind me. I didn't cry. I just sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the floor, trying to figure out where I had gone wrong. Was I foolish to believe he felt something real? Was it always just a passing confusion for him? Something that faded as soon as it became inconvenient? I didn't hear the footsteps outside my room until there was a knock. "Can I come in?" It was Colton's voice. I didn't answer. I couldn't, but he came in anyway. He stood in the doorway, not smiling, not apologizing either. "I figured you'd be up here," he said. I kept my eyes on the floor. "You kissed her?" "Yeah." Silence. "I needed to prove something," he added, stepping inside. "To who?" I asked, finally looking at him. "To me or to yourself?" He didn't answer right away. "To both, maybe." I laughed bitterly. "Well, congrats." Message received. Colton stepped closer, hands in his pockets. He looked tired. "I don't know what I'm doing. Everything feels like it's pulling me in different directions." "You didn't seem confused out there," I said, my voice colder than I intended. He sat down across from me, not touching, but close enough that I could see the guilt in his expression. "That night with you, it wasn't nothing. Could have fooled me." "I'm scared," he admitted, barely above a whisper. "Scared of how real it felt. Scared of what it means. Scared of losing your brother. Losing both of you." I shook my head. "You already made your choice." "I thought I had to," he said. "But when I saw your face tonight, when you looked at me like that, like I was someone else, it hit me harder than I expected." I clenched my jaw. "Because you were someone else. You were the guy who kissed a girl in front of the person you actually cared about." His eyes closed for a moment, like he was bracing himself. "I'm sorry. I don't need your apology," I said. "I needed you to be brave." He looked at me then, fully, as if finally seeing the weight of what he'd done. "I wanted to be, but I'm not." Neither of us spoke for a long time. Finally, he stood. "I'm leaving tomorrow, heading back early." I nodded, figured. He walked to the door, then paused. "You're not crazy. What we had, it was real." "Maybe," I said, "but real doesn't always mean right." He left without another word. I stared at the closed door for a long time. Weeks later, back at school, I picked up my pencil again. I drew not him, but the feeling he left behind. The weight, the silence, the longing. It bled through every line. He wasn't mine to keep, but for a while, he was real. And sometimes that's enough.